There's a will, there's a way, there's a way, there's a way.
Welcome to Blue Collar Elk Hunting, brought to you by ElkBros.com, with your host Gilbert Ornelas and elk hunting coach Joe Giglia. You want to hunt elk, and they live to hunt elk. Their goal is to share with you what they have learned grinding it out for over 35 seasons, doing what they love. So come on into camp and set a spell. Welcome to Blue Collar Elk Hunters.
Welcome everybody to a special edition of Blue Collar Elk Hunting, something I might just call Solo with Coach, because today it's just me and you here at Elk Camp, and today's episode is part one to begin helping you with a game plan for the upcoming archery elk season, whether that's this year, next year, or years to come. Because believe it or not, I prepare the elk hunters that I coach the same way that I prepared my athletic teams for success. If you've ever been an athlete on a team, this just might make sense to you. And when I talk about a game plan, y'all, I'm not talking about what state, what tags or draw strategy, what dates or moon phase, because really, when it comes to my game plan, none of that matters. It doesn't matter where the game is played, because if I'm game ready, if I'm jacked and prepared, it does not matter where the field is that we play. Put me in, coach. Let's play. That's where we're at with this. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk X's and O's, and we're going to start getting ready for the season right now, because y'all, right now is that time that will determine your success in September, October. Those folks that are waiting till June, July, those folks that are waiting till weeks before they take off, they are really going to struggle with their success unless they already have a developed system or a developed game plan that's going to be something they can fall back on. But even with that, man, you have to get started so much ahead of time just to really have your game up to par, learning new things, preparing new ways to communicate, preparing on your knowledge, preparing on, getting behind the bow, preparing physically. All of those things are going to play huge parts in your success come September and October. So what I'm going to do, though, as a coach, and this is how we're going to hit this in this little series that I'm going to do with you, is I'm going to start off with the ElkBros playbook on offense and defense. So we will probably only get to the offensive part when we start to digging in, and I'm not sure exactly how much we're going to get into it. We'll see how that goes as our time goes right now. But let's define offense. And the way I define that is your skill sets and strategies to put yourself in the right position to score. That's offense. I don't care what it is. I don't care what the competition is. It's those offensive steps, those skill sets, those strategies that you're going to perform, that you're going to practice to put yourself in a position to score. And there's two goals really with offense. Number one, creating scoring opportunities. And then secondly, becoming efficient in the red zone. And whether, that red zone is in the lane on the basketball court, whether that red zone is within that 20 yards on a football field, whether that red zone is when you're pole vaulting and you're already starting to roll up and you're getting in position to have to deal with the bar. Everything that we do and that we compete in, we have that zone where it is really up to us to complete, to finish, to be efficient, to be that stone cold person that knows what to do at that time. So we're going to talk about those. Now, defense. Defense, y'all, is acting and reacting decisively to your opponent and defending against those unforeseen moments, breakdowns in strategy and preparation that could magnify your own weaknesses and prevent a win. And it happens all the time. You know, when we go into a game, we practice a certain defense. We're ready to do that to be able to stop an opponent. And all of a sudden, they do something that we weren't ready for. And then how we react to that, or if we can react to that, or if we break down, is going to determine whether or not they're going to roll over top of us, or if we're going to find ourselves on the losing end of the stick. So it's real important to understand defense. And the 3 goals with defense are identify and eliminating your own weaknesses or possible failure points. These are the little things. These are really the things that you have to take a deep look at yourself. Look in the mirror and ask yourself, identify those things that could end up coming up in a situation at go time, at any time on that hunt, and become a failure point within your system. That's number 1 goal. Secondly, know how to read the field and adjust to any given situation. And then thirdly, act and react decisively to the opponent's actions. So we think about defense as just reacting to what the opponent does, right? But a lot of times defense is identifying where those holes are going to be, what your weaknesses are, where are the opponents going to find your weak spot to attack, right? Or the weak spot of your failure. And then you have to actually shore those up. You have to become better in those areas. And really, man, I think that's one of the toughest things, because most people like to work what they're good at. They really don't want to work at the things that they're not so good at. And by rounding out those out, by eliminating those holes, you really become way more efficient. When you talk about reading the field, when you talk about reacting decisively, all of those things have to come together to be able to actually become, in a sense, your offense, because you're ready for that. And when you see those things happen, you know that you can overcome them. Look, offense wins games and moments within a game, but you talk to any championship team and they will tell you defense wins championships. And when it comes to elk hunting, defense wins seasons. Okay, so in identifying, now that we've identified our offense and our defense, what we're going to do is now apply this to the parts of our hunting, all right? So what we're going to do is we're going to break down offensive goals first, and that's probably where we're going to stick today, and then we'll probably get to defense on the next one. So let's take a look at those 2 goals. Number 1, create scoring opportunities. So the question is how do I create those scoring opportunities? So you do that by understanding your opponent's behaviors and tendencies and then exploiting them. What are those tendencies or behaviors that you can exploit? Well, listen, their day is built around survival, where they eat, where they drink, where they rest. Everything that these animals do are about surviving, and not just that day. They have to be able to survive the seasons and the different seasons. They have to be able to survive the breeding. They have to be able to survive the snow. The females have to find a strong mate to breed with so that they have a stronger calf, so that they can survive and the predator, so they can survive the elements, so that they can be the strongest calf they can, so that they can continue and propagate the animal, right? Everything that they do is about survival. So when you think about that, okay, it's like, all right, so let's talk about where they eat, right? Or even what they eat, because these animals don't want to eat themselves out of house and home. They want to eat the things that are most nutritious, and they're going to take advantage of the plants that are available at that time and at that time of year in different places. Some of the things that I have found that is they're attractant. Well, number 1, they're grazers, right? So the better the grass, the better the opportunity for them to get nutrients from that grass. Can they browse? Absolutely. But they're going to graze first, and there's certain things that they like. Now, when it comes to browse, they will absolutely take advantage of some of the things that are high in other types of nutrients, like I've seen them eating mushrooms. And here in New Mexico, when we have a pinon crop, man, they love the pinon crop. Acorns are huge, right? And then you take a look at, and a lot of you have been dealing with this, is burns. So burns, because of the nature of the nutrients going back into the soil, if it is a healthy burn, it can really produce some excellent feed for elk, and it becomes an elk magnet in those areas. The faster the burn, the more surface that area, the more surface it burns, rather than nuking the soil and totally eliminating things, because, it does that. It'll be years before those animals get back. But if it's a fast burn, if it has gone through and it's just taken off the grass and it's burnt some of that underbrush and it's done some of the tops of some of the trees or the areas between the trees, so that now that more sunlight's coming through to be able to get to the soil and there's any kind of moisture, man, you've really got something there. So where they eat can be, especially a special choice. Now, and they will move. They will move from area to area. And you have to think about this too. The larger the group, the more food they need. So that's why when the breeding starts to happen, and depending on the size of the herd that a bull has with them, will kind of determine where they have to go to be able to feed for that size of a group. If it's a smaller group, if it's just, a cow and a calf with a small raghorn bull, they really don't have to find those big areas to have to feed, and they can find feed in the transition areas. Now, when they start getting those winter herds, that's why you see them in those big open areas, because they need a massive amount of feed now just for those animals to be there. Now, on the one hand with that, that's generally going to be in the winter season, generally, because things happen because of how much snow, where the snow is, there's a lot of variables. But generally, you've got mostly the cows, you've got maybe some spikes inside there, but most of the bulls are off away from the herd, and they're in their bachelor groups, in smaller groups. So they don't necessarily have to go to those big areas. The places that they're holing up that have grasses, that have water, that have cover, they can be safe in those areas and not have to move very far in order to find everything they need. For you guys that are rifle hunting, and you're rifle hunting in that December time, or you're rifle hunting in that November time, think about that. Think about what their needs are. About how it's built around survival. We talked about food, where they drink, and when they drink. Because I know, a lot of these states, and this really happens in southern New Mexico a lot, where there's not a whole lot of water and there's drink tanks. A lot of people will then set up on a lot of those tanks, right? They'll use blinds and different things and wait out for an animal to come in there. Well, it can be successful, absolutely. However, one thing that happens is, as those elk are smelling that human scent around those, they are actually choosing different times to go to drink, and they will go after, once the sun's gone down. They are especially careful a lot of times coming into water, because water not only attracts them, but attracts predators and all the other animals as well. Okay, where they rest. Their need for security is also partly controlled by their need for thermal regulation. And what do I mean by that? Well, you take in September when it's hot. I want you to realize that elk are a lot like we are, but think about yourself with a coat on, right? If you're out in the sun with a coat on and that sun's beating down on you, you definitely want to get into the shade where it's going to be 10, 15 degrees cooler than out there. So you're going to find those cool, dark areas to be able to rest. Whereas now you go towards the winter time of the year, and when you're bedding down, now they have a high temperature when they bed down, but they love to use that that sun is part of their thermal regulation to keep them warm now. So they're going to find those southern areas to be able to warm themselves. No different than you are. If it was freezing cold outside and there's snow on the ground and you're having to stand around for a while, you don't want to be standing in the shade. You want to be standing in the sun so that you get that. So where they eat, where and when they drink, where they rest, all of these are built around their survival, and it's built around their thermal regulation, and it's built around their security. So if you always keep that in mind, you can learn those tendencies and behaviors. They're herd animals. They have roles. They have a language. They communicate, and they have to breed. Just by breaking those down, there's so much that you can understand about them that is going to help you to understand when you're trying to exploit their behaviors or their tendencies. What does that mean they're herd animals? Well, they communicate, they have a language, and they use that within the herd. So you can use that language for curiosity. You can use it for maternal instinct. You can use it for aggressiveness. You can use it to threaten. You can use it to entice. You can use it to warn. You can use it for all these different things, and you can use it as announcement, as advertisement, as part of the breeding process, okay? And here's the one thing I also want you to remember is that as far as their tendencies and behaviors, this is so huge. And I think the sooner you realize this and the more that you understand this, the better off you're going to be when we start talking about strategies, when we start talking about our offense. And that is that elk are like us, just like us. They're visual animals first and foremost. They want to confirm things visually, right? No different than us, man. So you walk into your house and you go, hey, and you hear a response back. Well, you don't know if that came from the kitchen, the bedroom, the bathroom. So what do? You walk through your house and you look to see where that person is that was communicating with you. And we say it all the time, seeing is believing. Well, that's getting to change these days with AI, but seeing is believing. When we hear something and somebody tells us something that happens, right? Well, they always add their nuances. They add their perceptions, do all those. For us to really understand what they're talking about, we want to see it. Now, so elk. On what they depend on is kind of what we're talking about. They depend on their eyes the most. They depend on their ears second most, and then they depend on their nose third most. And people are like, yeah, but if they smell you, they're gone. Absolutely. But they only get the wind from the direction it's coming from. If they're having a breeze coming from the north, that means everything on this side and all the way around them, it's stuff that they're not smelling. They can't just depend on their nose, the ears. Well, the ears will tell them a lot, but again, when they hear those things, does that sound like an animal? Is that a natural sound or is it an unnatural sound? It's a big deal when you get something where when your arrow hits your bow in an unnatural way and makes that metal clang, that right there it'll send them off. But if it sounds natural, you can fool that, all right? They want to first and foremost see things visually. And, when elk are demonstrating to each other, and a lot of times we hear this as hunters, we get to hear what's going on. We get to hear them, screaming back and forth at each other. We get to hear them, chuckling at each other and cutting each other off. And you see the bulls, if you ever get a chance to see them, you'll see a bull try to chase off another bull. And we're like, okay, all we have to do is replicate that sound and that bull will come to chase us off. Well, yes and no, because the whole reason that he's going to chase that bull off is because he can visually see that animal, and that animal is not paying attention to their threats, or it's coming within that bubble, and that bull will then become aggressive and go chase that bull off. Now, can we use sounds to be able to bring them into us? Yes, absolutely. Because y'all, The two biggest things to your advantage in September is they have to breed and that they communicate. So with that said, and we're talking about game plan here, and we're talking about right now, we're getting ready. It's March. Right now I'm recording this today, March 17th. It's getting ready to be April 1st. You have from now until September to work on all of these skill sets that we're going to be talking about: offensive skill sets, defensive skill sets. And if you want to increase your success elk hunting, learn to call, all right? And I don't mean just learn to call where you have, and okay, I'm getting ready to jump off here. I don't want you to just say, I've got a cow call and I've practiced that and I know how to do a cow call and I'm done. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Because I'm getting ready to tell you that if you want to be successful in elk hunting, you need more than just a cow call. That's not true. I killed a lot of elk with a cow call. However, one thing that I've always worked on is to increase my success. I've done things with that cow call to make it more realistic. I've played with cadence. I've played with intensity. I played with volume. All of these different things, and we're going to talk more about that. But I want you to understand that when I say learn to call, I don't want you just to have a location bugle and a cow call. I want you to have all the nuances between that. And not only do I want you to have where you can do it, but I want you to start to understand where, why, and when. You know, it's the whys of the calls. And it doesn't have to be where it is, you know, something that you overthink. It doesn't have to be something where you have to dissect, well, did he just tell me that I have to move back, or he's going to come after me, or is he actually saying for me to come into him, or is he not even talking to me but talk? You know, you don't want to overthink a lot of this stuff, but the more that you start to understand what their language is, then you learn to be able to act and react to the things that you're hearing. Okay. All right. So it's so important to learn to call, because that calling will become part of our offensive scheme. All right. So again, we're talking offense and defense. And what I'm going to talk to you about is I am going to teach you the ElkBros offensive schemes that I use. Okay. And I'm going to break them down this way. The two offensive schemes I use when calling are isolation and invitation. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Isolation is basically directly engaging with the bull. I am calling him out to call him in. The more I understand his wants, his needs, and the deal breakers to those, the better my chances at an opportunity. Let's dig into that a little deeper. So the first one is isolation. The second one is going to be invitation. We're going to come back to that. But isolation, engaging with my opponent directly, calling him out to call him in, understanding his wants and needs and the deal breakers. Okay, so let's take that, understanding his wants and needs, all right? Because that can be different for different types of bulls. They're different personalities at different times of years, on different times of the year, okay? And what do I mean by those things? All right, so the different types of bulls. Well, there's going to be a difference between a young bull, a medium-sized bull, and a very mature older bull. And there's even a difference between those very mature bulls that have been around for a while. They sound differently. You hear people talking about a young bull or a young raghorn. Well, their voice is a lot like, if you think about, again, humans, and you're going to hear me come back to that a lot, this whole human and elk thing, because I really try to tell people the more you think about how you feel in any situation, the more that you're going to understand those animals, right? And we're going to talk about it here as far as wants, needs, and deal breakers, okay? If you were to break down the season, and I've done this before for a lot of you guys in different podcasts, and I've talked about this. I've talked about where you basically have the pre-rut, right? And then you have what I call the rut transition that goes into the rut. And then there's actually another transition after what we call prime rut, right? There's another transition that goes on, and then you have the post rut after that. So these are all things that if you understand how and what those animals are looking for at those times, if you understand that those pre-rut, that those bulls are still, they're still developing their pecking order, they're still in buddy mode, they're still trying to figure out who's the strongest, who's the weakest. They're trying to set all that up, and all of that is so that when they get into the actual breeding part of the season, they already know mostly, what their competition is, who's going to have that right to breed and who's not, or who's going to be second, third, and fourth in line to be able to do that breeding. Because it's real important for you to understand that even though they have developed a pecking order, let me make sure one thing is clear. The bulls do not determine anything in all of this. They don't determine, once they get with cows, and once that's the time of year that you're working in. So you've got that rut transition period where you got younger bulls with the cows all the way through to basically that what I call post-rut transition, where now you have the bigger bulls going off and the younger bulls coming back in that time right there. So when you have that going on, there's a little bit different need in that part of it, right? So those, when they're buddy mode and they get in there, that doesn't mean just because they've set up what they think is their right to breed doesn't mean that those cows will accept it that way. The cows want the strongest, most mature bull that they can to breed with. Now, if the age class is off in that, will they accept a younger bull? Yes, they will. Does that mean that bull will be efficient in breeding that cow? Not all the time. And that's why a lot of times you end up with cows that'll come in heat, the first estrus, the second estrus, the third estrus, and maybe even a fourth, depending on the age class of the bull, how efficient they are in their breeding, or whether or not they even accept them at certain times. So just because these guys have set up the order doesn't mean that that's what's going to happen, because the cows determine where they're going to sleep, where they're going to feed, who they're going to breed with. Now, a bull can absolutely push that decision making. He can hook that cow. He can be aggressive. He can do all those things to get them moving and get them out, right? Or to split them up, or to keep them herded in separated from maybe another bull that's coming in and get between them. Yeah, he can absolutely do that. He can be a bully. That's, what he does. He's big, strong, and he's got that set of knives on his head up there, right? So he is absolutely the big bully and the big man there. And it doesn't mean that he even has to be the biggest, you can keep coming down. They still have horns to be able to hook and to do those things, right? So the sooner that you understand that the bulls are not in charge of those things, like when they're going to bed, where they're going to bed, where they're going to eat, what they're going to eat, and who they're going to breed with, the sooner that you understand those things, it's really going to help you in your offensive scheme to figure out, what strategies to use at different situations. So like I said, you got that pre-rut, the buddy mode, you got that rut transition, and what that rut transition is, you got bigger bulls staying in the wings, and you got, smaller bulls that are starting to herd up cows. And these guys are staying in the wings because it's not their first rodeo. They're smart. They've been around. They're going to let the younger guys do all the work, get everything started herding up until those elk start coming in estrus, and then a bull's going to come in, move him out of there, and there's going to be another herd bull. He was a pseudo herd bull. It might be a herd bull. It might be another pseudo. It could be another one that pushes them out, right? There's all kinds of things dependent on the variables of the elk that are in the area. All right, so that's kind of important for you to realize some of that. Once we go from that rut transition, you're then going to now be in rut. And generally, with that rut, that's, that time when everything is going off, man. You've got cows coming in estrus. Now, can cows come in estrus early? Yes, absolutely, right? The younger, more immature cows are going to come in at different times. So it can absolutely, you can have a rut on September 1st and then, it disappears. And remember, with a rut, y'all, remember, ruts are not an overall phenomenon. A rut happens when a cow comes in heat and the bulls start vying for that cow. That's when you hear everything going ballistic like that. So whenever you hear multiple bulls screaming, that means that there is a cow in estrus, okay? So those bulls will be in with those, and then once those cows start coming in estrus, other bulls will move in. And that's generally when the bulk of the cows are coming in. So that's why you hear more of all of that going on. And then as it starts to get further into the season, then it could have been, and this has happened, and I don't know if you've seen it, if you've actually been out, in the woods in these times of years, but it seems like, man, that October 1st through 8th through 10th, and now sometimes even later, we're having massive ruts blow up. And now that could be either, that first group when they came in at a certain time for whatever reason, and then they weren't bred. Well, they're going to come in again another 20 days approximately, and so that's going to create another rut. So I think if you look at that, you say, okay, a lot of these cows coming in around the 7th or 8th or 9th, and then they're not bred. It's going to be another 20 days, and they're going to come in again, and that's going to take you into that October, and when you have those ruts that are exploding then. And it almost seems to me like those October ruts that I've seen and that I've experienced have been more intense than some of the September ruts, okay? Just something that I'm throwing out there, all right? So you have that. You've got the rut. You've got what we call that post-rut transition where those bigger guys are coming off, again staying in the wings, and then the younger bulls that have been pushed out are now coming into that role. And then there's going to be a period where those bulls that have been working hard have just got to go off and they've got to rest, okay? And they're going to find a hole and they're just going to disappear. So they are herd animals. They have roles, they have a language, they communicate, and they have to breed. The two biggest things to your advantage is going to be that they have to breed and they communicate. So if you're learning to call, if you're directly engaging through isolation with that bull, and you understand what his needs are at that time, and then we've talked about, so early season, is he in buddy mode, okay? Is he in rut transition, a younger bull, maybe a solo, a satellite bull that's trying to gather up cows, so he's coming into cow talk? Is that what's going on at that time? Or is it right in that prime rut now where maybe other bulls coming in could cause an aggressive response? Is it the opportunity where now if I act like a bull with a cow, I'm going to have another bull that's going to come and challenge me to take that cow? So you think about those. What are his wants? What are his needs? What is his age? Is he, does he sound like, or is he, I mean, you can tell by their voices, you can tell their maturity, you can tell sometimes. And then you'll get these bulls, man, that just, especially early season, they just chuckle a couple of times. And you really can't even tell a lot of times how big that bull is, because it's hard to tell from a chuckle really, what their state of mind is, other than a chuckle can be an invite, or it could be just he's saying I'm over here, or he might even do one of those crazy bed bugles. That might be all he'd give you. Just something nice and short, not a whole lot to it, a little bit whiny. You can tell their mood if they sound lazy. In fact, I've heard bulls at that time of year in the beginning that they're just not feeling it, but they want to, they're bugling, they're testing their voice, all that's starting to happen. So I start to hear, where they're bugling and they actually sound like a moo cow, man. It's horrible. You would think that it's another hunter for sure. And that's one thing that, I tell people all the time, especially early season and even during the prime rut. When you hear those things and you're like, there's no way that's an elk, always check it out. Always check it out. You can actually tell from the chuckles more if it's another human than you can from the bugle, because even in the prime rut, these guys that are going around advertising and screaming, they'll get laryngitis and they will sound horrible, man. It's like, it's just horrible. And you would swear it's either a dying cat or another hunter, but it's actually a bull. Always check it out. I have a video of one that is a beautiful bull. I call him into 12 yards, and there's no way as you hear him coming in that you would think that that's a bull. So you always check it out, okay? I said wants and needs and the deal breakers. So what do I mean by deal breaker? Let's go back to what I talked about as far as their tendencies, right? Remember I said that they want to confirm things visually. Let's say that you have a large room and you call out and you hear somebody scream in that room, right? And you come to the door and there's this large room and you can hear somebody screaming in the middle of that room, but you can't see anybody there. How are you going to feel about that? It's like, whoa, something's wrong here. And it's the same thing with elk, man. Elk are extremely good at pinpointing. And there's times when you can misdirect how they pinpoint. I do that all the time, and it's some of my favorite things to do. But let's say that I've been calling a bull, and a bull's on the same ridge, same elevation I am, and we've got enough trees, but about 100 yards out, I can visually see about 100 yards out. And let's say that I've been cow calling towards that bull, and I've been cow calling towards that bull. Or even worse, I used a tube and I cow called towards him, or bugled. Now I've thrown my voice forward, and that bull actually thinks I'm another 30, 40 yards closer to him than what I am. And now when he comes out into that area where he should see for 100 yards, I have just told him I'm 30 or 40 yards closer to him than what I am, and he comes there and he comes through the trees in what we call a stop and scan spot. A stop and scan spot is those locations that once an elk can should visually be able to see what they're hearing, they're going to stop and look. Again, we'll go back. Their day is built around survival, right? So when they come in and they hear something, they want to visually confirm first. And they should see an animal standing there in the middle because they've just heard it come from there and there's nothing there. That right there is a deal breaker. That bull is not going to come in. He's going to break off to the side. He's going to turn and go away. He's going to do different things, maybe circle to the downwind, trying to figure out what the heck is going on there. Or he may even do some things, especially I've seen this happen when they get close. They do what I call like a pseudo feed move. And I think they do this, to deceive a predator into moving, where they'll actually go down to feed. And they're not really feeding, they're watching because they can see 240 degrees around. They have eyes on both sides of their head there, so they can see pretty well, and they're just looking and waiting for a movement. If they catch that movement, they're out of there. So that's always something for you to think about with that. Isolation is the more that I understand his wants and needs, the better are my chances at an opportunity. But with isolation, I am directly engaging. So if he answers to a cow call, then I'm going to give him a cow call. If he answers to a bugle, then I'm going to stay with my bugles. I might include other types of bull noises. I might throw in a cow call possibly to let him know that maybe I'm a bull with a cow. There's different things I could do, but as long as his button's being pushed, I'm going to stay on the same button. But I am engaging with him. We are mano y mano, all right? And this is actually the most common thing that most people know about elk hunting. Almost everybody that elk hunts are hunting bugles, or they're hunting that response from a bull. And if they don't hear a bugle, if they're walking and they're, given location bugles and they don't get something back, then they think there's no elk in the woods. And actually, that's not the case. Just because those bulls are not responding verbally doesn't mean that they're not responding in other ways, either going and raking a tree, okay, or using their feet to come into you because they want to visually confirm what they're hearing, all right? So that's where I think most people truly mess up, is when they are trying to directly engage with a bull. They're always dependent on that bull responding verbally. And that's where I use and change to a different offensive scheme, and that's called invitation. So what is invitation, and what's the difference between that and isolation? Invitation is when I create the illusion of elk doing elk things, or portray a situation that deceives and sucks a bull into my setup. Look, we do this in sports all the time with our offenses. We try to make it look like we're doing one thing and then we do another, right? It's like misdirection. It's like setting up the defense so that you can put them in the best position for you to succeed. And that's the same thing that I do with invitation. I create an illusion so that elk are coming into me, right? For a reason or a situation that is going to make them comfortable, because it resembles and it acts like and it sounds like elk doing elk things, that is going to go towards that sense of maternal instinct, of curiosity, of breeding, right? Of pecking order. It's going to go to any of those things to try to get that animal into me. But in order to do any of this, you must learn to call, okay? Now, I'm going to go more into invitation, and I'm going to go into the second part of the offense here in a second, but I want to give you a little bit of tips on learning to call, okay? When you are learning to call, I will tell you some of the bad habits that I see people and people that I coach the most, the big mistakes that they make. Okay, number one is when they do finally get to make a noise, they stay with that noise and then they're like, okay, I can do that. And then they are not going to use a call again until they get out for the hunt actually. And then by that time, sometimes that reed has actually the latex has gotten more dried, it's gotten more cracked, or it might be stretched from all the practice that you did, and you get out there and it just doesn't work the same. You should always have multiples of your call. You should always be working them throughout the season. And what I like to do is when I'm not using, I'll make sure that they're dry and that they're in a dark, cool place. I even put mine in the refrigerator just to keep that latex in the best shape that I can. But I also use all of my calls to make sure that they're sounding the way that I want them to sound. And I will have 3 of my favorite call minimum with me so that when I'm in the woods, those are going to be the things that, I know they're going to be right when I pop them in my mouth, okay? So that's something that you need to think about, is making sure that you do things so that your calls, you have multiples of them so that they don't become a failure point. And we're going to talk more about that on the defensive side on that. So that's one thing that I see, is that they try to do everything with the one call and they don't really get themselves ready, for what they need, okay? Now, the other thing is when they are actually calling, that when they're trying to learn to call, a lot of people will try to use their lips to be able to create the tones. In other words, they'll do like, and it really sounds more like a cat when you do that. So you shouldn't be using or moving your lips. You can purse your lips to tone down. Or throw it in different directions, but you don't want to use it to control tones. You want to use the dropping of your tongue, right? That's what creates the tones. So the distance from my tongue to that latex is what creates the tones. And so what I just did for you is something that when you're practicing, we call it the O'Shea. We call it the O'Shea drill, the O'Shea siren drill. And if you learn to perfect that drill, you will become so much better at any type of call that you want to do, all right? Because listen here, watch the siren drill. Now, I'm taking air in my stomach. I'm not filling my lungs up here. I'm taking air. I'm like getting that diaphragm big. That's how I get all the air that I want, and I push with that diaphragm. I'm pushing from down here, okay? You keep working with that diaphragm and keep learning to control that latex. Because here's the thing, if you can do the siren drill, you're going to get so much better control and learn to hold it longer. Getting better and better control. Because when you do that, a bugle and a cow call are the yin and yang of each other. So all I got to do is do the front of the siren, and then I have a bugle, right? The back end of the siren, is the cow call. It's just the opposite of what I have there, okay? So the siren drill is your number one friend. And learn to do other musical sounds with it. Try to play songs with it. Just work on your control with that. Because if you can do the siren drill, you can then add voice inflection to make any elk sound that you want, pretty much, right? So I can get that estrus type buzz. Or I can go, and I can get that mature growl just by I just add that growl. And if the higher, I can change the tone of my growl. I can change that tone to get different sounds. So if you can just do that siren drill and then learn to add that voice inflection, you can do any sound. We'll talk about like chuckles later on, but just to get you so that you're practicing. And here's another thing. When you practice in your car, most of the time because of the sound, we're in there doing a cow call. Way too loud. Now, if we're trying to send it, where we've already done it softer and quieter, the best way for you to really practice your cow calls is to take your cell phone, take that puppy, set it on record, put it 20, 30, 40 yards out away from you, go in the trees, and then cow call. And go back and listen to it. Listen to what it sounds like. And then work on your different tones like that, okay? Calf calls. You want to work on those as well. And that calf call is just that little, I talked about that diaphragm hit. It's just really doing a little quick hit with the diaphragm where you're not really getting all that mature bottom. I'm just staying with that top part of it, just that little bit of squeak, and you can get softer and softer. Just took this one out of the bag. Hasn't even really been worked yet, and you can hear the kind of sounds that it's making right there. So practice those sounds. And when you do it, practice different lengths, different volumes, different cadences. And what do I mean by cadence? Like for me, and we're going to talk about some of those scenarios when I talk about the other things. When I'm doing that, when I'm going through the woods, I want to sound like now you saw two different directions, actually three directions, a little bit different in length, different in pitches, and different in volume. And by doing that, I create the illusion of different animals. So that's one way to practice on your calling. To me, the bugling is the easiest, right? And honestly, I have killed 85% of the bulls that I've killed strictly with cow sounds. Now, I've used like other type of bull sounds that don't give me away. And what do I mean by that? So whenever I do this, immediately another bull can kind of gauge my age by my voice, right? He can kind of get an idea of my size. We do it all the time, right? We're always trying to gauge how big a bull. It doesn't mean it's always correct, but it's just one way that you can kind of get an idea of who that bull is because of the way they sound. And most of you guys, when you bugle out there, you're going to use a lot of the same rhythms and pitches and lengths to the point where other elk are able to identify you, right? And that means also if they've come in and they've seen you and you don't know it, you'll never get that bull to come into you because he's already connected you with that voice. So there's ways to change that up. But what are some things that elk can't tell who the bull is, can't recognize the voice, can't tell how big he is? Raking, huff, puffs, moans, whines. There is no way they can tell who that is from that, right? So those are types of sounds that I use so that it makes it really, really hard for other bulls to identify who I am, my size, and they got to come in and check it out, okay? So these are the types of things that you want to practice right now, man. Order your calls now. Start calling like crazy. Make sure that you've ordered enough calls that you can break them in as you're getting closer to season so that you have them fresh in the season. Don't call with the same call all season long and then take it in the woods out there only to have it break down on you. All right? Don't do that, man. Make sure that you have everything ready for you to go. So before I get out of here, we've talked about calling. The next thing I want to talk about offensively is becoming efficient in the red zone. Remember, that's the two goals. One is to create encounters, and then the other one is to become efficient in the red zone. If you think about it, whenever somebody sets up a winning play in the red zone, the formation or the setup for a winning play is the most important, right? They know what they have to do, how they have to set up in order against that defense and against those tendencies to ensure that they can be successful. You are on offense. You get to choose where and how you set up. No matter where you're at on the playing field, there are key points to a setup. And I will tell you this, man. The number one reason that I think most people fail when they actually have an encounter is because of their setup, the way they set up, where they select their setup, how they set up. And there's some key points to that you should know. Like number one, you never want to elk hunt so that the elk is hiding and you're seeking, right? You always want it so that you're hiding and they are seeking you. So whenever I'm creating a setup, I always think about me playing hide and seek with my daughters in the house. I want to find a place where they have to go in and physically get close to me to where they have to find me. And you want to do the same thing. You want to create a situation where you are putting either terrain or vegetation between you and that animal so that they have to come into your efficient killing distance in order to see you. And you're better off doing it so that you create things so that you have area in front of you that they have to come on one side. Now look, can you always do this? No. I mean, the reality is that setups are so dynamic because I can't tell you, you're going to set up on an animal that, is responding and you guys are going back and forth. You're going to set up once. You're going to set up again. You're going to move over and set up one more time. You're going to give up on that and because he's moved and you're going to get up and do a chase or something like that. And then you're going to reset up. Or you're going to all of a sudden see that animal. You can see horns coming through and your only choice is to drop to the ground, get an arrow on and get ready to go. Okay? So, you don't always get to be able to pick your setup, but there's certain things that you can always try to do when you're not caught with your pants down. So my ideal setup to me is where I'm actually up in elevation, not a lot, but where there's a dip where that animal can't see me unless that animal comes up to be able to come to a stop and scan spot. That's one of my favorites because what I like to do with that a lot of times is, and that's one thing I didn't talk about in practicing your calling. When I practice my calling, I'm always doing things with my tube as well. And the reason I do that is, I want to actually always be deceptive to a bull in where I'm at. I never want a bull to think that I'm right here. Okay? I never want him to think here. So if I'm in my vehicle practicing, this ain't happening. But like if I get out and I get a chance to do it outside, I absolutely am practicing different things like watch this technique here. This technique, I try to do it so that I'm actually sounding like I'm multiple elk in different areas. By me using my tube to throw calls behind me, using my voice to go off to different sides, I can sound like a herd of elk. I can throw bugles out behind me. And this is great because if I throw a bugle back and I have a bull in front of me and I actually sound like there's a bull further back and there's a cow right here, I create a little bit of a cow pickle is what I call it. So I'm actually sounding like the cow here, the bull further back. So I can use this tube to throw my voice. I have actually steered. And guys, I'm telling you, look, if you are partnered up with somebody, I don't care if you use a Gatorade bottle, man. If I'm partnered and I can be away from my partner, I can pull a bull past them because I can put them up further, right? But if I'm on the shoulder of that person, or if I'm solo, I always want to sound like I'm further back than what I am. I never want an elk to think that I'm right here. Okay, so I will actually work and practice with this because you have to go out and actually work with your bow on the course. And I do a call, and then what I'll actually do is I'll drop this down because I'm wearing a string, and I'll be hooked in, and then I'll pull and shoot my target. I practice all of that, and I do it because I'm actually working on my defense at that point in time, which we're going to go get into a little bit more. I want to talk more about this efficiency in the red zone. And on our next one, I'm going to start with that, but I'm going to roll back to the learning to call. And actually, when we get back, and the next time I get in this series with you, I'm going to talk about invitation a little bit more on that, on my offensive scheme for that. But I want you to understand the importance of learning to call and learning to practice those sounds, and not just practice one single sound, but by learning to use those different levels, those different directions, those different urgencies. And you add urgency by adding more plead or adding some voice to it. That creates those, and we'll talk about that even more. I know I've kind of gone basic with this right now, but my whole goal right now is to help you develop your game plan for this upcoming season. And I think the number one thing, besides getting out and physically already getting out and getting your walking in and getting hiking in and getting your body and working those areas of your body, those knees, your hips, your ankles, working all of that, I think learning to call. And I don't have to worry about you working on your shooting. That's just sexy. Everybody does that. But learning to call and doing it all the time, always having one of these in your mouth and practicing with them all the time is so critical right now. So that's where I want to leave you right now. I want to leave you with the fact that this is going to be your most important friend for the next few months. Get multiples of them. Get to know it. Get to practice with this in every chance you get in actual situations. And then with that, you are already working on increasing your success. I promise you, the biggest reason for my success in the field is my ability to call. And there's other things that I'm going to share with you in this little bit of Solo with Coach series that we're going to continue to improve on. Well, guys, you have the motivation or you wouldn't be listening. But do you have the commitment? Because I can give you the formula for success. And I'm telling you, this is the exact same thing that I always tell my athletes. I've done it with other coaches. I've given them my playbook to how I do things. But that doesn't matter. I can lay things out step by step, play by play. But the most important part of the success formula is the part that's out of my control, and that's you. You have to work at these things. You have to develop these skill sets. And if being successful out in those elk woods is what you want, then you got to say, I'm going to get it done. I'm going to do it. I'm ready. Put me in, coach. Y'all, keep believing and achieving. Keep dreaming of the screaming. But most of all, until next time, keep grinding.
Where others' fear is home to me. No boundaries for my soul. The pounding, the primal blood, driving hunger like no other, running through my veins. No man versus nature, only me versus me. A centuries old challenge, raging deep inside my soul. No anger, malice or evil, only a hunter and his prey. This is my life, country born and raised. When that whistle blows, I'm on the trail, pounding in my head. There's a will, there's a way, there's a way, there's a way. This is my life, I know it's my day, my life. Don't think you know me, my life, no odds will own me, my destiny, my way. Like a ghost unseen, tasting every scent, knowing with every breeze. The trail before me, the fire burning inside me. This is what we live for, honor, passion and pain. This is my life, grinder born and raised. When that whistle blows, I'm on the trail, pounding in my head. There's a will, there's a way, there's a way, there's a way. This is my life, I know it's my day, my life. Don't think you know me, my life, no odds will own me, my destiny, my way. This is my life, runner born and raised. When that whistle blows, I'm on the trail, pounding in my head. There's a will, there's a way, there's a way, there's a way. This is my life, I know it's my day.